The agenda will be like this: existing schemes, then RoDTEP and intro, then certain important aspects of it, and then what is the committee for RoDTEP expected to do. Now, thereafter, some of the schemes started coming in. Before we had the MEIS, we had few schemes that were launched over a period of time, identifying it with reference to specific sectors and goods. For example, we had the focus market scheme, then the market linked focus scheme, then the Vishesh Krishi Gramin Yojana scheme, then the focus product scheme, then the agri infrastructure incentive. So let's have a look at each one of these schemes, a slide each. Focus market scheme came in 2009, with effect from 2011, with a vision to secure and support exporters in international export market against the international trade barriers. And here the exporters of all products were entitled for duty credit, and this duty credit was provided in the form of duty credit scrip at the rate of 3% on the FOB value. Of course, there were few supplies which were not covered under the scheme, but focus market scheme did provide some sort of incentive to exporters of a number of products in the form of duty credit. And the focus product scheme, the objective was to incentivize export of certain goods and products which have high employment intensity and other advantages. Now, the incentive was in the form of duty credit scrip, which was freely transferable. So you don't need to see what happens, whether if you get it is not a refund in cash, and therefore if you get any other type of an incentive, what do you do with it? Should you wait for utilizing, etc.? But this is freely transferable. And of course, incentive was divided into two categories, 2% and 5% on the FOB value, depending on the product that is being exported in terms of the scheme. We also had slightly a different type of market-linked focus scheme, where certain countries which have high employment intensity in rural and semi-urban areas, which were not covered under any other schemes, that were identified, and exporter will be given duty credit scrip if you export specific products to these countries, and these of course scrip is freely transferable and saleable. So duty credit will be provided at the rate of 2% on FOB of the product. This is what came slightly maybe a couple of years before. Vishesh Krishi Gramin Udyog Yojana was aimed to compensate the high cost of transportation on export product. As Mr. Ashwin was pointing out, the fuel cost and all other costs do add up substantially to the value of an export product. This scheme, when was introduced, was essentially to compensate this high cost of transportation. And of course, few areas where transport were identified in this scheme, like agricultural products, minor forest products, then Gram Udyog product, forest-based products. These were identified and were indicated as being eligible to the scheme. Then there was an agri infrastructure incentive scheme for products which fall under 1 to 24, livestock and all agricultural products. All of them were incentivized with duty credit scrip equal to 10% of FOB value. Capital goods imported relating to agricultural export were allowed. This is one of the few schemes that specifically made available the import of capital goods for agricultural export, because there is always a dispute whether when you do you manufacture an agricultural product, you don't have make an agricultural product, so will you be entitled under EPCG? That always was an issue. That was slightly modified, and then it was introduced under this agri infrastructure scheme. And here the benefits under the scheme is transferable on imports other than import of cold chain imports. Now, then we had the MEIS scheme that was introduced in the foreign trade policy of 1520 that came into effect from 1/4/2015. This essentially replaced all these schemes: FPS, then MLFPS, FMS, then the agricultural infrastructure incentive script, and then the Vishesh Krishi. So all these schemes were combined and introduced into what is called this MEIS scheme. Now, MEIS scheme essentially talked about two different types of exports. The MEIS, where merchandise exports from India scheme, and then the SEIS. Here also the rewards was in the nature of duty credit script should be granted, which can be freely transferable, and these credits can be used for payment of basic customs duty and additional customs duty for import of any inputs or goods, including capital goods, payment of central excise duty, payment of basic customs duty. This had more attraction because it was almost equivalent to a cash, which companies have, cash refund. So these credits were normally transferable and can be used for this. And the objective was to promote the manufacture and export of notified goods and products. The Appendix 3B had all this goods that were notified for the purpose of the scheme, and the basis of calculation of reward on the realized FOB value or as given the shipping bill in freely convertible foreign currencies. All that was indicated in terms of this Appendix 3B. Therefore, MEIS as it evolved was essentially an export incentive scheme introduced in the policy of 1520, provided benefit to SEZs also, claimed as a percentage of the realized FOB value, and it was to provide benefits to exporters in the form of duty scrips to offset any infrastructural problem. So this seems to cover on a very broad basis. If you make an export and then you have all possible benefits under this, on the realized FOB value, you will be entitled for an incentive, and that incentive will be in the form of a scrip. Makes it easier for you to utilize the scrip. Now, this was one of the clarifications that was issued in terms of MEIS. It has come in April 2020, where the end date is extended up to 31/3/2001, and the MEIS scheme for items listed is available till 31/12/2020. And of course, any item covered under RoDTEP will automatically be removed, and a detailed operational framework of the RoDTEP will be notified separately. Now, in June, again, the government introduced, gave some more clarifications. Relaxation has been provided from applicable last dates. Validity of the scrip has been extended till 30/9/2020. For SEIS services rendered, last date for application with 10% late cut is about on 30/6/2020. And for SEIS rendered after this period, 5% late cut, but till 30/6/2020. So these are some of the relaxations that have been provided under the MEIS, under the SEIS scheme, especially during the COVID situation and thereafter. So the latest circular of latest notification of September 2020 have added two new paragraphs in the foreign trade policy 3.04A and B, where a lot of discussions are going on whether the government was right in doing it, because the maximum benefit to IEC holders under the scheme is limited to 2 crores, and that too for the exports made between 1/9/2020 to 30/2020. And any exporter who has not made any export for a period of 1 year prior to 1/9/2020 was not eligible for the benefit under the scheme. And any IEC obtained after the issuing of the notification is not eligible for any benefit. And this scheme, Indian scheme as a whole, will be withdrawn from 1/1/2021. So this is where the government has indicated that they have only an allotted amount of maybe 10,000 crores or so, and therefore all benefits, all exporters have to avail the benefit under the scheme as early as possible. And then they also have laid down that if you have made exports only during this period, you will be eligible for it. So over a period of time, each of these schemes seems to be seeing their day off. Now, therefore, why is there a need to replace the existing scheme? As Mr. Ashwin was pointing out, we all came before because of a WTO dispute. USA filed a complaint that the foreign trade policies of India is against the guidelines of WTO. So a WTO dispute resolution panel analyzed it, and it held that certain export promotion schemes are against the guidelines of WTO. and the same have to be withdrawn. If you look at and they also said as India crossed the per capita income of $1,000 per annum, it cannot provide any prohibited subsidies under the Annexure 1 of the subsidies and countervailing measures. Now, as per the direction of WTO, India has to withdraw MEIS schemes and other schemes. Now, what are all the other schemes that would be withdrawn? That is still to be made clear, but otherwise, they have broadly indicated that most of the schemes where there are benefits contingent on the exports, those schemes have to be withdrawn because they are against the guidelines of WTO. Therefore, what we expect the schemes to go, if the WTO direction is to be complied with, is this: MEIS, then SEZ, EOUs, EPCG, duty-free import scheme. I'm not too sure whether there's a talk that SEZ may still remain because it falls under a different category, and SEZ as a concept is popularly looked at in various countries. So maybe SEZ as part of this outgoing schemes may not go, it may still remain, but most of the other schemes can have a hit if the WTO direction has to be complied with.